The following program deals with a controversial subject. The theories expressed are not the only possible interpretation. Viewers are invited to make a judgment based on all available information.
This is your captain speaking. We are beginning our descent into madness.
Open your mind.
And we're back to another edition of West of the Rockies. I'm Frank. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know it's late, but get ready to have a spooky good time.
An amazing time.
That's right. Genevieve, how you doing over there?
Oh, and I'm here too.
I'm doing Genevieve's fine. Here. Doing all right?
Well, how are you doing?
I'm excited. Man. Tonight we're gonna talk to a good buddy of mine about one of the most fascinating, strange, scary places I've had the pleasure of setting foot in.
Something I've heard so much about, but I've never had the pleasure of being anywhere near, really. I mean, not in a paranormal context.
The place that we're talking about is Linda Vista Hospital out here in East LA, and specifically in Boyle Heights. And if you've tuned into this show in the past for one of our paranormal nights, you probably hear me talk about Linda Vista and some of the stuff that went down for me in there. As I've said many times in the past, it's the place where I experienced the paranormal for the first time, at least. It's the place where I became a believer, I'll say that much. I experienced some weird things before, you know, but I guess I always rationalized them in a way of like, okay, it could have been this, could have been that, you know, I could have been like half asleep or whatever, you know. You always try to make sense of things.
The standard.
Yeah, but this was the place where I was wide awake and stuff was happening and I had no explanation for it.
And, you know, for the people that don't know, I mean, obviously you've had so many TV shows, movies filmed here, and I think for our listeners, especially on, you know, Indie FM right now, the music videos are the most dominant in that repertoire. And those music videos filmed at this exact location include songs by Duran Duran, Garbage, Avenged Sevenfold, Rise Against, and Hollywood Undead, 9 Inch Nails, even Falling in Reverse, Combi Christ, Alice Cooper even. So there is a huge lineup, and that's only a small percentage.
That's a fraction.
That's a fraction of all the movies, TV shows, and music videos that were filmed here. Yeah,
you know, and you know, working at this station over the years, you know, I met so many people, a lot of musicians that have filmed there, and you know, the topic would come up, and they all had a story. And even if they didn't experience something,
they still sounded freaked out.
Oh, no, they would tell me, it's like, I don't know what was about the place, but I couldn't be there for more than a few minutes. Like, they would literally just go and stand outside. Yeah, no, this place is crazy. And tonight, we're going to talk about this place, Linda Vista Hospital, with my good pal, Richard Berni of the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. I owe him, you know, the opportunity, the privilege, if I may use the word, to have spent quite a few nights at Linda Vista. In all honesty, nothing compared to that first night. So many things happened that night, and we're going to get into it with Rich. I'm going to throw it to the phone, and we're going to welcome our friend Richard Berni to the show. Rich, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I know you're a really busy guy, but we're really, really excited to have you on.
And I'm excited to be on, Frank. It's been a while.
Yeah, no, it definitely has been. And, you know, as I said at the top of the show, Linda Vista was the place where I became a believer in the paranormal. Prior to going there and spending a night there, I was a bit skeptical, to be honest. But before we get into all that, Rich, why don't you give folks a bit of history about Linda Vista? I think most people are probably familiar with that location from its paranormal history over the years. So why don't you tell folks a little bit about Linda Vista Hospital, how it got started, and how did it become this paranormal hub, if you will?
Well, the Linda Vista Hospital, back in the early 1900s, the Santa Fe Railroad basically made its way west. And as they laid tracks down, making their way west, they came across a lot of industrial accidents. And because of the amount of industrial accidents laying the railroad line, they decided that as a company, the Santa Fe Railroad decided to build hospitals along the way, along the route. So between, I believe it's Kansas City and Hayward, California, they put up 14 of these type of, back then, state-of-the-art industrial type hospitals to meet the medical needs of the railway workers and their families. And I know that the employees, we interviewed a few of these employees, and back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they paid something like, I think, 35 cents a pay period into their health care for themselves and their family. So as they made their way west with the railway line, they built the Santa Fe Coastline Hospital in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, California in 1907 and put it up. And then they did a full renovation facelift in 1928. And it basically kind of still looks like that today.
And when did Linda Vista begin to decline, if you will? Because the Santa Fe Railroad had big bucks, they were able to acquire a lot of the best of the best as far as, Medicare went, as far as doctors and surgeons and head nurses and stuff like that. So Linda Vista Hospital was basically the pearl of the medical care back then. And it had no competition. It was the only hospital in the area. St. Vincent's hadn't yet been built. I believe County USC medical facility was built up in, I think, 1936 or 1938. But during the late 60s and 70s, local hospitals started blossoming all over Los Angeles, 3 or 4 of them in the Boyle Heights area. And because these new facilities were coming up with state-of-the-art technology and medical care, a lot of the physicians and surgeons at Linda Vista Hospital were basically kind of swooned by these new medical facilities, and they basically left their positions at Linda Vista and went on to further their careers at the new, St. Vincent's, County USC, White Memorial, and the Lincoln Hospital, which is right around the corner from Linda Vista. So it was basically, it just fell victim to progress, it sounds like, right?
Exactly, yeah. The brand new hospitals were coming up looking nice and shiny, I guess. And these, the doctors were like, well, you know what? We're going to go on to the state-of-the-art facilities. And right at about that time is when the hospital started changing ownerships and it basically started its decline in the mid 1980s, I would say 84, 85. And I think if it wasn't for the local emergency rooms being really busy with a lot of the local gang members falling victim to gang activity and stuff like that, mm-hmm. I think that right there was a hotbed of business for the local hospitals. Sad to say.
So when did Linda Vista actually close its doors and, began to fall into the state of abandon that it got in? During
the early 80s, I remember I had a friend who was a security guard there. They actually decided to open up Linda Vista Hospital because it was lacking, the business, in the medical field. So what they did is they opened up the facility to the movie industry, in the Los Angeles area. And so now Linda Vista Hospital, became, one of the hotbeds of the film industry where, Charlton Heston filmed there, Burt Reynolds filmed there, Gene Hackman, plenty of well-known actors of old, made movies there in the 80s and late 80s. And so by the time 1991, 1992 came around, the owner says, you know what, that's it. We're not able to stay afloat as a medical facility, so we're going to close the doors. So in 1992, the owner decided to close the doors and, decided to shut down the hospital side of Linda Vista Hospital and then run it as a full-time movie film location. It was 1992 was its last operational year.
prior to Linda Vista closing its doors, were there any reports of paranormal activity in the hospital?
Yeah, luckily I I had an aunt who worked the front desk there in the 70s, and she would come back with some really cool stories about, that place is creepy, and I thought I saw a shadow person, and she considered herself a sensitive, and so she would come back to the house with all these great stories. And I would talk to my friend who was the security guard there, and he was like, well, we're not supposed to talk about that, but yeah, there's some creepy things going on. I also had my uncle, who was an employee with the railway, and he was treated there for his sickness, and eventually ended up being moved from the Linda Vista facility to the Hayward facility up in Hayward, California. And he himself was, basically listening to the stories that the nurses were sharing about objects being moved and elevators going up and down, doors opening without anybody pushing buttons. So I think it had already started, the stories of what was going on.
Do you have any theories? Maybe were there just unhappy patients or people that perhaps passed away before their time? I try to be, even now, even till today, I'm very skeptical about, what's going on. I'm always trying to overanalyze things and stuff like that. And I was the same way at Linda Vista Hospital. We spent 4.5 years there, almost full time. I basically put my career on hold for a little under 5 years just to put all my time into the hospital and to try to grasp and try to record and document as much stuff as we can in the time that we had left there. So I came to the, I guess it's my own theory. Uh-huh. I think that hospitals are a very special place. They have their own special place in the universe because it's a place where people come into life, and it's also a place where people leave this life. So my theory is I think that there's some type of, I don't want to call it magnetic, or I just want to say, I think it's some type of energy imprint that we left behind, during this happening of coming into the earth or leaving, this plane of existence. So I kind of look at it like that, because over the 4.5 years that we were there, a lot of the personal interviews of people who were, housed there as patients and or employees, they all kind of agree that a lot of the allegations and incidents that happened there were kind of like relating to the medical field. And let's talk about your experiences real quick. First of all, how did you get involved with Linda Vista Hospital? Were you already investigating the paranormal at that point in your life?
No, I wasn't. I was actually, I kind of got into, a couple of the paranormal shows on cable TV and stuff like that. And I was saying to myself, wow, you know what? These are, growing up and listening to my neighbors talk about, La Llorona and the stuff that was going on at Evergreen Cemetery and other locations,
Yeah.
I was brought up with the ghost story. And so growing up in Boyle Heights and going to Hollenbeck Park and fishing and looking for crayfish, Linda Vista Hospital loomed overhead. It was always looming over us. It was a place that was basically, we were forbidden to go in there. We, stay away from there, stay out of there. And, trying to stay on point. In 2009, I decided, what a great time to create a group of researchers who are like-minded, researchers who have a sincere desire to hold on and preserve the local history. And, maybe I could, go into this hospital and introduce myself and explain to them who I am, where I come from, and what my goal is. And so one day I got up enough guts to walk in and knock on the door. And the gentleman, answered the door by the name of Francis Corticas, who had been working there since the early 80s, and who actually is still there to this day. So that's a great thing.
Wow.
I said, hey, I'd like to talk to you. He goes, sure, come on in. And I said, I just this year, I I formed a paranormal research group. And he goes, oh, you're one of them. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, okay, well, here's the pamphlet. Here's the costs for spending the night here. Mm-hmm. And this is, I go, no. I go, that's not what I want to do. I'm from here. I had an aunt who worked here. I had an uncle who was housed here as a Santa Fe Railroad patient. And I have a sincere desire to assist you, or I have a sincere desire for my group to come in and help you with whatever this hospital needs. Do you need painting done? Do you need trash cleanup? Do you need security? Do you need landscaping? We will do anything and everything as long as you allow us onto the property. That way we can have our own fun when we have time. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, dude. He goes, I'm not interested. Wow. I'm like, oh, okay. So I shook his hand and I walked away, and I was kind of like, wow, I totally screwed that up, So in the interim time, we went out and investigated other areas, local insane asylums and cemeteries and stuff like that. And then one day, about 3.5 months later, he gave me a call and said, hey, does that offer still stand? And I'm like, sure. He goes, well, can you come in? I said, yeah. So I came in and I sat down with him. He goes, explain to me, what is your perception on the paranormal? And so I explained to him, I said, well, you know what? I come from, my dad is full-blooded Native American. My mom is Mexican-American from Los Angeles. And my father brought us up to believe that we walked every day side by side with the spirit world. And that, every once in a while, our paths will cross. And that's when we have a spiritual or some type of experience seeing the other side. So I firmly believe in the spirit world, and I want to be able to document that if that's happening here. And then he proceeded to explain to me his personal experiences of what he called paranormal experiences there at the hospital. And after about a 3 to 4.5 hour meeting, we went out and had lunch, shook hands. And not even 2 weeks after that, he started calling me up and saying, hey, we're going to have 2 film shoots here. Would you like to take care of one group while I take care of the other? And I'm going to leave early tonight. So can you lock the place up? I'm like, sure. So he basically entrusted me, with this new position. And it went so well as far as, the time that I was spending there, that I started, with his knowledge and blessings, I started bringing in 3 or 4 group members, a couple of other group members. And before you know it, I had, I think, at one point, 25 researchers with the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. And we started, looking after the movie shoots and stuff like that, doing security and cleanup. And, there was plenty of stuff to do because the movie companies come in and they thrash the place. So that's basically how BHPP was able to do what they did there at the hospital.
I actually got the pleasure to meet, I think most, if not all of the crew of the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. It was, I remember this quite vividly, as you can imagine. It was in April 2011. And, I believe you had reached out to me via email to, be there to do a short presentation, for an event you guys were having. And, I went in there not knowing anything about this hospital, aside from like a quick Google search when I read, it's haunted. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's abandoned. All right. So it must be kind of creepy. That was about the extent of it. But boy, Rich, I remember that night. To this day, I still tell people about it. And every time I tell the story, I get chills and I relive the whole experience. But,
what's the brief overview for the listeners who don't know what's the summary of what happened?
I will keep it brief. So I was there, as I mentioned. Rich was kind enough to extend an invitation for me to be there. And I did my little, presentation in front of a lovely audience. And, afterwards, I was kind of getting ready to go, and Rich was like, oh, you're welcome to stay, for the overnight, and stuff. And I was like, oh, well, I've never done this in my life. I have no idea what to do, but I'm going to stay and give it a shot. A couple of things happened throughout the night. Okay. I'll say that much. But the kicker for me was being in the surgical wing of the hospital. And we were doing an EVP session, and let me tell you, we're sitting there, and I remember the time. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was around 3:45 in the morning, and we were standing at the kind of the intersection of the hospital wings. and we're staring down this hallway, and it's just pitch black, right? I mean, Linda Vista was just black. Like there was no light coming from anywhere, which made it even spookier. And I was there with 4 members of Boyle Heights Paranormal Project, whom we bumped into, and they invited me to partake in an EVP session. I didn't even know what that was. That's how green I was. I didn't know what that was. Yeah. So we go to this part of the hospital. I'm sitting there, and they start, running the Frank's box, or the spirit box, as it's known. And they ask, "Can you say the name of somebody that's here?" And the box starts saying Frank in the middle of all the the static and random bits here and there. And it was pretty clear over, some of the other noise that it was scanning all these frequencies. It said Frank, and it said it, I think, about 2 or 3 times. After the after the 3rd time, I was like, "Oh man, this is not."
Is it because it's the Frank's box?
I know, right? That's what I thought. And all of a sudden, and Rich, this is where things began to go south for me. I'm sitting there in the dark, and literally about probably, I don't know, half a foot away from my face, I just hear, and mind you, there were the 4 members of BHPP were all 4 lovely young ladies, braver than I am, to say the least, way braver than I am. And, they're having a blast. They're really excited about all the, little bits that we started picking up. And in the middle of all this excitement, about half a foot away from my face, I just hear this male voice just give the most cold and scary sigh, like a, it was just terrifying. And I remember grabbing the arm of one of these young ladies and like squeezing it, going like, "Did you just hear that?" And she was like, "Yes, isn't it exciting?" I'm like, "Not really, not for me, not right now." As this is happening, we're staring down these dark hallways, and in the main hallway we were facing, at the beginning, we were seeing what looked like laser pointers, just these red dots kind of dancing around. And I remember looking behind me and looking everywhere, expecting to see somebody kind of playing with some laser pointers. Nothing. It was just pitch black. And all of a sudden on the wall, and Rich, this is the scary part for me. All of a sudden on the wall, the other stuff, I could probably would have been able to go on about my life. Yeah, normally. But what happened next is what really freaked me out, was that in one of the walls, the best way I can describe it, it was like a silver, white, bluish spray paint. Yeah, but at first it was just like about the size of your hand. If you spread out your hand, it was about the radius of that. It was about that big, and it was just on the wall. And I remember that, we started thinking, well, is that light coming in from somewhere? And then this thing starts swirling and getting bigger. And I don't want to put ideas in people's heads, but the one thing that came to my mind was that looks like some type of portal is opening up. And I remember
too much Stargate, right?
Yeah, seriously. And I remember, like I said, the BHPP crew that I was with, they were like, "Oh, you're doing such a good job." Like they were talking to whatever was manifesting itself, like, "You're doing such a good job." And they were fearless. And I'm like literally getting in my Hussein Bolt stand. I was literally going to bolt out of there. And, slowly the light began to kind of subside and, things got back to normal. But I do remember before that little episode ended, a few other people had arrived and they also got to see what was happening. So I know I wasn't crazy, but I want to actually hear about you, Rich. What was one of the paranormal experiences that you had there that stays with you to this day?
Wow. Before I even jump into that, I want to say, that experience that you had down there with that group of folks, was a pretty famous experience amongst the crew members also, because the crew members that you were down there with, they were, for some reason, who knows why, but they had a style of spirit communication that seemed to bear fruit. Okay. Wow. And I remember that night because they all came up and they were saying something amazing just happened. Wow. And I was looking at their faces and I'm like, And then they were like, well, ask Frank. He saw it too. It's like, okay, you know, but I remember that vividly, and it's, you know, probably one of the greatest memories I have. And I'm sure these young researchers carry it with them today, is that they were able to form, if you want to call it that, they were able to form a rapport or a relationship type of thing with what was going on there, the energy that was going on there. And they were always lucky enough. It's like fishing, you know, you could sit there all day and all of a sudden get the big one. They were always experiencing some great stuff. So, you know, I'm glad you were able to experience that with them. As for myself, you know, I think, as far as I had 2 bone chilling experiences there, you know, at Linda Vista Hospital. One of them being, we were a brand new crew, the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. I think there was only maybe 4 of us, and we were able to. I misunderstood the guy who let us in that one night, which was Francis. I misunderstood the time slot that he was allowing us in there, and so we ended up having to go in at about 3:30 in the morning. We decided to go into the basement of the mental services building, which everybody called the psych ward.
Right.
And we were down in the basement, and everywhere I went, my signature research tool was an old JVC camera on a tripod. And what I would do with that tripod is that, you know, I would film whatever I could film with the IR light, and then I would also catch EVPs on the audio of that movie camera. So I set up in the corner, and I was next to a documentary film crew that followed us in. So there was 3 of them plus 4 of us. And they set up their stuff, and while they're setting up their stuff next to me, 3 members of BHPP kind of started, you know, meandering about inside the basement area, and they started conducting an EVP session. And while they were doing their EVP session about 15, 20 feet away, I caught on audio 2 EVPs of a female voice coming through, telling me to go back, go back. Go back. And so, you know, I'm like, okay, all right. I heard that. Did you hear that? And that was kind of like in real time. And then not even seconds after that was this bone chilling, deep growl. And it lasted for about maybe 4 seconds.
And you heard this in real time or on
and
the
I have the audio tape. I can send it to you guys if you want.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
It's amazing.
But Genevieve was asking.
Yeah. I was wondering, was this as you heard it, or was this only on the EVP?
This is in real time. We actually, and this is the funny thing about it, is that the 3 members of the documentary film crew, myself and the female researcher that was standing next to me, we heard it. Wow. But the other 3 BHPP members that were about 20 feet away, and they were conducting their own EVP, not only did they not hear it, they didn't record it.
Really?
So that was close.
But it's recorded on my video camera. It's recorded on my audio cassette, along with the female researchers and the documentary film crew. They were able to catch it on audio. Oh, and basically, when the growl ended, it lasted about, I would say, almost 4 seconds, and it was a very deep, low. It almost sounded like a grizzly bear in a tunnel in an old cave, and it was just growling like it wanted us out of its den. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where you'll hear when I send you the tape, the sound, the audio, you'll hear me giggle nervously, like what the heck was that?
I'm glad you got to giggle still. I would have shouted.
Yeah, and then the female researcher next to me, she's like, "Did you hear that?" You know, kind of. And then the other guys, the documentary film crew, packed up their stuff and left.
Wow.
They're like, "We're out here, dude."
I don't blame them.
I can imagine.
So, you know, that right there was probably one of 2 bone-chilling events that happened with me personally, you know.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that same night, I kind of skipped over it, but I guess I should mention it now, was that was the first night, or the first time, I should say, I captured an EVP. I remember after all of this had happened, I went home around, 5:30 in the morning, and the sun was coming up, I couldn't sleep a wink. So I started kind of going through, and mind you, I've never done a paranormal investigation.
So you're going to listen to the scary stuff.
Yeah. So I started listening, going through some of the video. We had a little flip cam and some other gadgets to record. And I remember I was going through some of the video and I picked up the best way I can describe it. It was a growl, but we didn't hear it in real time. I heard it on the recording and I was there.
Like a banshee shriek. I almost feel it was like slightly more feminine, like shrieky.
I wouldn't call it feminine, but maybe, I mean, it depends on who, the way you perceive it. But I remember hearing this thing, and maybe I'll play it, after the interview. I know I played it a few times. I'm sure some people are probably tired of me playing it, but that was my first EVP, and it was a darn good one. But yeah, it was kind of a growl, it was a type of growl. What, I know we can only speculate, but what I'm even speechless. Like, what could possibly create those sounds? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what would freak me out.
That's it. It's baffling because you experienced probably what we considered one of the most common type of hauntings there at Linda Vista Hospital. At any given time, there was one time where I took a group of 20 people down to the first floor intersection surgical area, and they were lined up, lights on and everything, and I was explaining to them the history of the hospital, and in front of everybody, because everybody gasped, we heard exactly what you heard, a deep male, like a sigh. That's all I can describe it as. It was a loud sigh that came out of the air. And I looked at everybody and they looked at me like, did that just happen? And I go, did you guys hear that? They're like, oh my God. And they were freaked out. 4 people just bolted from the line. They're like, I'm out of here.
Wow.
I'm done with this tour. But, Frank, you captured, what we've caught, plenty of, and they were growls, and we would, something that we would call snarls, like it's almost something that like a little chihuahua does, like, right. Like that. Yeah. To me, that's a snarl. We've caught plenty of those too, and, I don't know what it is. I really don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, it's just trying to even imagine what it could be. It's frightening enough.
We've asked a lot about your experiences at Linda Vista, but I'd like to know if you ever had a first paranormal experience prior to that, or what was your very first sort of out there, occasion before coming into this field?
Okay. Well, I tell everybody this because I want everybody to know that I was pretty much primed by my dad. He was a huge UFO, Bigfoot, alien, ghost believer. Okay.
Good man.
In the house that we grew up in, Boyle Heights, he saw a couple of ghosts. And so one day he explained to us exactly his experience. And so I think that, reading all his books and all his history books, and my dad was a very educated, a man, and he shared all these things with me and my sister, and, the possibilities that all this stuff can be out there, So, growing up, I think listening to my dad's stories and stuff, and then hanging out, because I basically grew up at Evergreen Cemetery. We would go play football there. We would fly kites. I know everything there is to know about that cemetery. I mean,
wow.
So in that cemetery, I had an experience. I was about 11 years old, 12 years old, and my mom is during the summertime, before the sun went down, all my mom had to do was, put her head out the kitchen window and scream my name, and I could hear it 4 blocks away. And I would have to run home before I get, the heart beaten out of me. So, I was, flying a kite with a bunch of buddies, and, I looked over my shoulder and I thought I saw, and not too many people know the story, but I wrote a story about it later on called The Goat Man. And, it looked like a man hunched over, but he had like a human/goat features with horns on his head. Mm-hmm. And he was hunched over and he was darting between the tombstones. And so I looked over my shoulder and saw that. And I said to myself, did I see what I think I just saw? So I got up and I told my friends about it. And right away, my friends, pick up rocks and sticks. And we went over there and nothing was there. But that was my first experience of what I thought something paranormal, at Evergreen Cemetery. And I brought that story up to my uncle, who ended up telling me the story about a man back in the 50s who's everybody's parents back in the 40s and 50s in Boyle Heights would tell their kids, you better get back before dark or that man with the hooves is going to get you,
Jeez.
And so my uncle, who heard my story and my experience, kind of compared it to their version of this night watcher who had hooves for feet. He would stand on the street corners in Boyle Heights and he would take kids who stood up, after dark, So, who knows,
When about sorry, it's just really interesting because we've actually heard similar stories, from other people about, a very dwarf-like creature with a man's body, but a goat's head. And it sounds exactly like what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I was 11, 12 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, right before I started junior high school, and that was in the, in the early 70s,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 55 now. So, that was a pretty, it was a pretty scary thing to see, not only to see it, but to then share it with my uncle. And then my uncle told me about the story that he had of this man who, looked like a goat that would stand on the corners, and he had hoofed feet, and that's pretty scary.
Dude, that is terrifying. That's not pretty scary.
I think it's even scarier that we've heard, stories that essentially corroborate what you're saying.
Yeah, that is so crazy because I heard the first story and I'm like, okay, it could have been, but Rich, you definitely gave me the creeps with that because then it does sound like there is some weird.
So if it's you, your uncle, and these other people that we've spoken to, that's
crazy.
More than one person.
Yeah, what is it about that area, Rich? I mean, it seems like East LA, like you said, obviously Linda Vista's there, Evergreen Cemetery's there. What do you think has caused, so much paranormal activity on that side of town? You don't hear these stories so much from like the west side of LA, for example.
Yeah, my thoughts on that is the population in Boyle Heights. I mean, Boyle Heights is a community that basically was born out of several groups of, several immigrant groups. We had Czechoslovakians, Russians, we had, the Japanese, we had, African Americans. All these different cultures were basically halted at the Los Angeles River and weren't allowed to reside west of the river, in the, 30s, 40s, 50s, they just weren't allowed to cross that area. So they basically, as they made their way from Mexico or from the Midwest, they ended up, hitting a roadblock, a bureaucratic red tape roadblock. And they ended up just pitching up their tent in what is now Boyle Heights along the 5 freeway at 4th Street. And they made it their home. So all these different types of cultures, had their own belief systems, their own religions and stuff like that, But one of the things that the common thread with all these cultures there in Boyle Heights was, the ghost story. Everybody had their own version of their ghost story, And I think that the history, their plight, the struggle, and the very tight familial bond that each of these families had, because I was lucky to grow up in Boyle Heights and experience having Russian neighbors, Japanese neighbors. I was very fortunate to be able to walk into a friend's home that was Japanese, and I would have to take my shoes off at the front door, walk in, be very quiet, hands at my side, and kneel down, sit at the table, and eat dinner with them, and then do the same thing at my friend who was Russian. I would go to his house, or they would come to my house, and they would, we all had that really fortunate upbringing where everybody was one big happy melting pot of a family, and I think there's just a tremendous amount of energy and old history there in Boyle Heights, not to mention the old homes, the buildings. And I just would like to attribute it to some of the old energy that's in that area.
Yeah, and I don't want to get political here, but I just want to take a quick second. That to me, I love hearing stories like that because I think that diversity, experiencing all these different cultures, is what truly makes America great. And that's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
And I'm absolutely behind you 100%.
Very
on
cool.
that.
That's why we get along so well, Rich. Before I take it back to Linda Vista, because I know there's probably folks listening who are also, natives of East LA, and I just gotta ask because you can't talk to somebody from East LA without the question coming up: where did you go to school, Rich? Garfield or Roosevelt?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I'm a proud Rough Rider from Theodore Roosevelt High School.
Nice.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure people got that. Okay, let's go back to Linda Vista real quick because there seems to be, at least in my opinion, you were really generous with me and allowed me to be there on more than one occasion, and I'm eternally indebted to you for that because, like I said, it was a place where I experienced some things that I will never forget. But talking to people, from the people that would go and take the tour for the first time to the people that had been there investigating for years, it seems like there were a couple of entities, to say the least, that were kind of like the regular residents, I guess you could say, of Linda Vista Hospital. The two that come to mind is the little girl that some people have claimed to have seen and heard, and another one was some strange entity that would hang out in the furnace and at the lowest level of the hospital. Can you tell me a little bit about those two and any other maybe regular entities that you heard people encounter?
Okay, well, I think that other than as far as the most common, other than the growls and the snarls that were basically happening 2 or 3 times a week, I'd like to say that I thought that there was at least 3 female spirits there in the hospital, and they were very vocal. There were plenty of times where they whispered in my ear, where they were caught on audio cassette or analog and digital, where they were basically, giving messages like, go back or get out, for us to get out, or they would say my name. Richard, creepy stuff. Whenever they personalized it, it was pretty creepy. It would bug me. It would bug me into the next day, and then I would, man, they know my name. Right. But it got to the point later on where it became a little more fun. I became a little more adjusted to the shock of something whispering something in my ear. The little girl. I have her on plenty of EVPs. We have over 278 EVPs, Class A EVPs caught there at Linda Vista Hospital.
Wow.
Incredible.
Are these online anywhere in an archive?
We have, if you go onto the official Boyle Heights Paranormal Project page on YouTube, we've got about 3 or 4 of them put up. We took a lot down. There's one thing that we found out with the paranormal community is that people are paranormal. So when you put stuff up, the paranormal activity starts, where people just start grabbing your stuff and start being kind of nasty about things. And so we decided to take down a lot of our stuff. But if you go onto that page on YouTube, you'll catch a couple of great Class A EVPs that we're really happy with. We just kind of, there's plenty of more in the vault. We just haven't yet been able to. Everyone's just got on with their careers,
right?
And we're all kind of like doing our own thing, and we're just waiting to sit down with an editor and put all this stuff together because we have a gold mine of stuff.
Nice. Hit me up, Rich. I'll be happy to render my services whenever necessary.
We're up for.
Yeah. Frank, I'm going to take you up on that, so be careful, okay? Because let me tell you, it's
let's do it, Rich. I would love to be able to partake in an endeavor like that.
Sleepless nights. Here you go.
Okay.
Now let me ask you something, because obviously, this hospital is massive. If you guys didn't get a chance to go and walk the halls of Linda Vista, this place was huge. It was like a cruise ship in a way. as far as size, and you could literally get lost in that place. At least I never dared to venture by myself. But again, over the years that, I was familiar with Linda Vista and I got a chance to visit, I would hear about certain places in the hospital that seemed to be more active than others. I believe, and feel free to correct me if my memory serves me wrong, but I think one of them was like the third floor. Another one was the surgical wing. And I think one of the more notorious places was actually the detached building that was known as the psych ward. There was a popular room in there. Can you tell me a little bit about that room and how it got its notoriety?
Yeah, you're speaking of room 323.
Yes, yes.
Room 323, obviously on the third floor. I was down at the southwest part of the wing of the mental services building. Now, we caught maybe about 3 or 4 really good Class A EVPs there. I didn't know too much of the history of the room, but I do know that I personally interviewed several people, at least 6, I should say, including Zach from Ghost Adventures, where they've actually were touched and scratched and pushed, and where the manifestation became physical, and that's what made room 323 infamous, because the energy that was in there, or the room right next door, because I, with my own eyes, was standing in the bathroom doorway to the room next door to 323 and saw 3 scratches appear before my very eyes on the back of the neck of a local sensitive. So the place was kind of gnarly.
Like I said, I remember hearing quite a bit about room 323, and I actually also remember when Linda Vista began to undergo renovations. I believe you guys kind of just saved the door. I think we all can picture anybody that was there and saw the door to room 323. I think everybody would be able to sketch it out and just how the numbers looked and everything. Do you know whatever happened to that door, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, a couple of researchers from the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project, Steve and Ashley, who are actually getting married on Saturday. So congratulations, guys.
To them, yeah.
They now have the door to 323. I actually have the original numbers that were on the door.
No way.
So,
oh man.
Yeah, I have the brass numbers.
Has anything spooky happened with you keeping the numbers or anything like that?
No, but the door, when the door was in my room, it was a loft. When the door was in the loft, it had these really strange episodes of vibrating. The mirror would go through this vibration thing going on. There was a couple of times where I wasn't at home, and neighbors were like, "Wow, you must be having some hell of a dance upstairs because they're having a great time up there." And I'm like, "Well, nobody's home. What do you mean?" It got to the point where, a couple of shows actually came over to the loft and try to record stuff in there, and just to try to capture the stuff that I was experiencing by bringing this stuff to my place. And, to the point where I would run upstairs. I would open the door at the bottom of the staircase, run upstairs, and I would stop at the top of the staircase saying to myself, okay, now, what was I supposed to get? And then I would look over to my computer desk, and my chair would scoot out for me.
Wow.
That's creepy.
That's...
Yeah. I would turn around and hightail it back downstairs. And then later on, I would come in, I would sage the place and burn some sage.
Right. I don't blame you. Earlier on in the interview, we were talking about some of the productions that have taken place there, and some of people's favorite TV shows and movies have been filmed there. Just to give the folks at home an idea of some of the movies, Pearl Harbor, Suicide Kings, Insidious Chapters 2 and 3. As far as TV shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dexter, True Blood, yes. And not just that, but music videos were also shot at Linda Vista, including for bands like Garbage, Duran Duran, Avenged Sevenfold. So definitely it's expanded a wide spectrum. While you were there and these productions were happening, did you ever hear from the crew about, hey, we were just over here and X, Y, and Z happened?
Yeah, and he's gonna love that I'm mentioning this because he's come to be a really good friend of ours. Danny DeVito, actor and director.
Mm-hmm.
He did a month and a half shoot there at Linda Vista Hospital, and I think what he was telling us is that he does a couple of movies every year, and one of those movies is a sci-fi / paranormal movie, and he uses another name. He doesn't use, directed by Danny DeVito.
Okay.
So, every night, when Francis would leave and I'd be in my office, he'd walk up and he'd tell me there was one incident where he says, "Hey, Rich, could you tell the people on the 3rd floor?" Now, this is while Danny's filming in the yellow room down below on the 1st floor. And I think you're familiar with the yellow room with the blue exam chair that was there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So while he was filming there, apparently their sound is picking up people talking upstairs and walking around. Now, I'm in my office. He comes upstairs and goes, "Hey, Rich, can you go upstairs and throw the people out because they're coming out in our sound?" I'm like, "Sure, Danny, I'll go up there." So I go up there and, the doors are locked. So I unlock the door. I walk in and I walk the whole 3rd floor. I walk the whole 4th, 5th, 6th floor.
Wow.
I go up on the roofs. Nobody's there. I come back downstairs and tell Danny, "Danny, there's nobody upstairs. Everything's locked. Everything's secure. The facility is solely yours and your crew's."
Wow.
And he's like, "I want you to hear this." So he plays back his sound. Okay. And when he plays back the sound, it's people walking and talking, phones ringing, as if it's a normal day at the local hospital, basically.
That is incredible.
Pretty crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah. And, there was a time too, during that time that he was, filming there. It was basically in the dead of winter, and LA sometimes gets kind of cold, and it was a cool night, but the 1st floor of Linda Vista Hospital can get bone chilling. So, he's down there wrapped up in a blanket and he's doing his thing. And then he calls me on the radio. So I said, "Okay, I'm on my way down." I go down and he's like, "Rich, it's happening again. There's somebody upstairs on the 3rd floor."
Oh, boy.
I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it again." So I did it again. This is like a totally other, I think 2 weeks later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he calls me on the radio and he goes, "Rich, forget it. It stopped." He goes, "It's just the spooks." So, and that's just Danny DeVito. I mean, I sat there with James Franco, who was directing the movie there too. He had experiences of a child's voice coming out on his sound equipment too. So, it was a very normal thing to happen. And the movie industry kind of just shrugged it off, and it made it kind of exciting for the crews, because every film crew that came into the hospital after the last shoot was done, their film crews became automatic paranormal groups. Okay.
Right.
So they themselves went out, when we were ghost hunting and trying to find what they were going to find. And,
Yeah. Over the years, I bumped into people who worked in film and television. I would tell them, "Well, I do a paranormal show." And they're like, "Oh, have you heard of Linda Vista Hospital?" I was like, "Yeah, actually, I've been there." And they're like, "That place is creepy." You would be surprised how many people were there for a shoot, came out believers, it looks like.
Including an amazing artist. We have reasons to believe that he's some sort of, psychically connected artist. But we know a guy who essentially went in there and started just painting a little girl. He just painted a girl out of nowhere. And the interview he was meant to have that night in Linda Vista, it was a general article that was meant to be written about him. The journalist never turned up. The journalist told him, "I was so freaked out by the vision of a girl that I turned around and walked out again."
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah, I think that, and we're talking about James Picard. I definitely encourage people to check it out. He was actually featured in an episode of Ghost Adventures.
Yep.
An amazing artist, amazing.
I remember
painter.
him.
Yeah. So he was telling us that, he was waiting for this reporter down in the what I believe, from what he described, was the surgical area, the surgical wing of the hospital. And he was just sitting there.
Yeah, because I think James had an art show there, I believe.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. It was an exhibit. For his series.
I remember.
Yeah. So we interviewed him about a year and some months ago, and he brought this story up, and then I told him, "Well,
and he had never heard of any of this. That's the most.
Yeah, no, that was he actually was pretty spooked when I told him that other people have seen and heard this little girl, and apparently the reporter that was meant to interview him, she was walking down the hallway to where he was when she heard, I believe, a little
Bells
girl
or something,
giggling,
yeah.
and she like did a 180 and headed out, and that was the magic, if
That
you
was
will,
the
of
end
Linda
of the
Vista.
interview.
Yeah, that little girl was there. She, her presence was known. Getting back to one of your questions, as far as the in-house spirits, the little girl, she was pretty prevalent in a lot of the EVPs, a lot of the video audio. There was there was plenty of one of our EVPs that are actually up on the YouTube channel. It's a little girl saying, she's asking for water.
Oh, wow.
She's asking for water. And then there's another one, of a little girl saying, help us, I'm afraid. And that's a little girl. And so, it got to the point where we started, focusing on, hey, wait a minute, sometimes paranormal groups, they go into a location wearing their Dragon Slayer gear and they take, swords and everything like that because they're ready to slay some demons. When in fact, it's not always like that. It's just something as simple as a small little person trying to reach out, trying to communicate. And, I have been so lucky to have, a person in my life, Sarah Chavez, who was part of, the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. And, one day we were down on the first floor intersection and she started singing childhood, songs. So as she was singing, the little girl came through, not in real time, but on audio EVP.
Oh, wow.
And that's how we found out what her name was. And so, she came through and her name was Chloe. And this event happened over a 3-day period where Sarah's like, I don't want to leave. I want this to continue. I want, she's opening up and, this something magical is happening here. Let's continue to do this. So, we ended up getting permission to basically camp out. And that's what we did, and then, and we ended up doing it, more often after that happened. And then later on, a family from around the corner, came over, the Martinez family, and said that there was a little girl who lived in their building. Her name was Chloe, who actually was run over by a car in front of the hospital. And they took her into the hospital and they tried, life-saving techniques, and she ended up succumbing to her injuries.
Oh, man. That's heavy.
So,
yeah. Let me ask you about, I think Linda Vista has probably one of the most documented histories. I mean, if we were to take everyone that has captured something in that hospital, we would need a lot of hard disk space for all the things that people had captured there. I mean, this place was just active 24/7 at times, it seemed. And one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that I got to see was actually something that you showed me one night when I was there with a few friends. And it was a video of what looked like a shadow figure. And to be honest with you, Rich, I've never seen a shadow figure in real life, and I've never seen a shadow figure on video that was convincing, I should say.
Right.
However, when you showed me this clip, you can clearly see, and I'm trying to remember, and I'm sorry if my memory is a little blurry, but I think the video was shot, I can't remember if it was night vision or maybe it was one of those like laser,
Yeah, it was actually done on an older camera. Let me take it back a bit.
Okay.
It was actually my birthday. It was my 50th birthday, and we decided to have a birthday party up in the penthouse for me.
Okay.
And it was a surprise birthday, so I didn't know anything of it. But once I was up there and I was enjoying the night, and we had cake and ice cream and stuff like that, I made a couple of phone calls and I said, "Hey, look it, you've been emailing me, you've been texting me, you've been calling me, you've been wanting to come into the hospital. Come down now, because we're going to be here all night. Come down, bring all your stuff." So an old acquaintance of mine, Eric, had a local paranormal research group, and he brought his videographer, who is now the videographer on the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project, Mr. Steve Thornton. He came out to the hospital and set up his camera in the corner of the pharmaceutical area of the main lobby at Linda Vista Hospital. He just set it up and he just let it run. The thing is that earlier that night, a couple of paranormal researchers, I won't mention their names, were out in the back driveway, kind of smooching and talking to each other and stuff. And they were startled by what they said was a shadow person running across the driveway. So it freaked them out, and they ran inside and they told everybody about it. Later on that night, we decided, well, you know what? We're here for the birthday party's over. Let's bust out all our gear and let's do some research. 2 or 3 days later, maybe even longer, I was contacted by Steve Thornton, and he says, "Hey, Rich," he goes, "I think I might have caught something in the main lobby." Now, let me tell you, Steve, he's huge on gaming. So his living room he's wrapped in these big screen televisions, and he sits there in his little gaming world, and he just games all day long, right?
Nice.
Works at night and does what he does. But what he found out is that when he would look at this footage on regular the LED television, I guess, that you can barely see the outline of the shadow person, or what we thought it was just somebody walking through the lobby. So when he put it on his 50-inch plasma, we were totally blown away about what we saw, because now on the plasma, for some reason, it was a lot lighter than it was on the LED screen. And this shadow person was like 7 foot tall. And it just walked into view, lifted up one of its legs as it was walking forward, and it disappears just as fast. And he seems to, we're still trying to figure out, was he walking into a wall? Was he walking through the lobby? Was he walking out of the main lobby doorway? It's pretty compelling. I mean, people have seen, we put the video up on YouTube, and of course people are like, "Oh, that's somebody," and "Oh, it's too pixelated. Oh, it's too grainy," so we decided to take it down. And we invited anybody who wanted a copy of it to, request it, and we'll send it to them.
Nice.
But it was a pretty creepy piece of footage, only because as this shadow person is walking through the lobby, right behind it is this green glowing type of disc or orb behind it.
Yeah, I remember watching that video that night. I think it was right before we started investigating, and then to say that video set the tone for the evening, it would be an understatement. Rich, we're running out of time, so let's kind of just fast forward, because obviously Linda Vista has experienced a rebirth of sorts. I again was fortunate enough to be there even during part of the renovation phase. I remember you showed me some of the work that was being done at the time in the psych ward, and I believe that was the first part of the hospital that got renovated and converted to affordable housing for the elderly as it is now. But while the renovations were going on, whether it was in the psych ward or in the main hospital, did you guys hear anything from the construction crews as far as them experiencing some paranormal activity?
Yes, the construction supervisor actually contacted us during renovation of the first phase, which was the mental services building, along with the second phase, which was the main hospital itself. And so he contacted us and said, "Hey, we'd like for you to listen to some audio tape." And basically, one of the electricians, it's actually a video, and he's actually an electrician he's dancing with this light bar in his arms, and he's mimicking a song that's on the radio. And as he's mimicking this song that's on the radio, this creepy robotic voice comes out and starts mimicking the song. And it's very robotic. It's very scary. It seems almost negative, the vibe,
Right.
But yes, they experienced tools missing, keys missing. They experienced a lot of electrical problems in the renovation of the first phase of the renovation itself. And once the first phase was finished and families were able to move in, that first summer, 4 families moved out because of what they experienced and because of what they alleged as paranormal happenings.
Jeez. And now, I'm no genius here by any stretch of the imagination, but how can I put this lightly? I don't want to seem rude or anything like that, but
go on, seem rude.
But how can you look at the history of this building and then decide, you know what we need? We need to turn this into housing for elderly folk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be crass or anything like that. Just,
That's the last thing you want to do.
You would think, right?
Right.
So do you have any insight as to why the decision was made to, I mean, of all the things you could have turned, I mean, it could have still been great apartments, but it just seems particularly cruel in a way.
of bad taste, right?
Yeah.
To say it.
Yeah, pretty much.
No, you're right. You're correct. I being a part and being so close to the hospital, and being a part of the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project, one of our priorities was to try to save the hospital from being demolished.
Right.
So we went to City Hall. We went to the planning committee meetings. We did all that to express to the planning committee that this place, has historical status. It needs to be, kept alive, so to say. It can't be knocked down. It's a vital part of the east side, So luckily they decided to keep the building, and the developer who purchased the building, basically placed a gag order on, BHPP, and basically forced us legally not to mention anything about its haunted history during the renovation time of the hospital.
Wow.
So, we couldn't say anything. Our hands were tied. Just like any other developer, they go into an area that's kind of like, going through the gentrification, the beginnings of gentrification. And so when they purchase the property, they want to stifle and stop all talk about that property being haunted or any of its past. So, their number one reasons is, they have to make money off their project, they're a developer and it's a business. And so what they did is they purchased the property and, they put a hush gag order over the whole thing. And, luckily, a buddy of ours, J.J. Rogers, filmed the movie. And it kind of loosely tells the tale of how we try to stop the developer from coming in and pleading with them and begging them and doing everything we could, but they didn't listen because money is, there was a bunch of money looming there. So, they went ahead and purchased the property and built it, and they decided to thank God for Francis Corticos, who forced the company to preserve its historical status and the historical areas of the hospital, like a lot of the inlay terrazzo tile, that's all been kept. Nothing was touched in the main chapel area. That's all been preserved. So they did a great job, thanks to Francis, in preserving the architectural history there, at Linda Vista Hospital.
I've seen photos of the inside of Linda Vista, and it looks like a really, a lovely place. And, what you're saying as far as, trying to downplay its paranormal history, if you will. It reminds me what I've been hearing a lot about the Cecil Hotel, also in downtown LA. Well, not also, it is in downtown LA, but now they're calling it to stay on Main, I believe, and they don't want anything to do with, its checkered history, to put it mildly, I guess. So I understand that you can't stop progress, I suppose. Before Linda Vista reopened its doors in its current incarnation, do you know if anyone maybe did any type of a cleanse to the place prior to reopening it? Yes.
Francis Corticos and the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project sent out emails to local clergy. And a few people came out. We had a rabbi, we had a Roman Catholic priest, and we had some Buddhist monks come in they flew in from Vietnam, and they did a spirit calling ceremony where they build through the use of bells and incense and stuff like that and prayers, they build a bridge that helps the spirits there cross over into the next world. And it was a pretty profound religious ritual and experience for me to see personally. And it was we like to think that all of those religious, acts, assisted in relieving Linda Vista Hospital of some of the spirits that were bound there.
I'm glad to hear that. I think it helped a great deal, but it definitely sounds like there are still some entities hanging about. We were just there not too long ago, just taking a few photographs, and this young lady came by in a bicycle, and she started talking about how there's like underground tunnels connecting Linda Vista to different parts of the city. I don't know about all that. I know there is one tunnel that connects the main hospital to the psych ward. But then there was another lady on a little scooter saying that I believe she lived there actually, and she was saying, this place is totally haunted. So, it seems like
it's still, not to cut you off, right? But it's still very active.
Yeah, it definitely seems to, people are still hearing and probably seeing some things, and
it's a place that I visit all the time, because my buddy works there, and he's very gracious. And he's always saying, "Hey, come on over for lunch." And right now I'll extend an invite to you and your co-host. Come on down. Let's have lunch.
I'm game.
We'll have lunch at the hospital.
Yeah,
we'll be there.
Yeah, so you say the date and time, and believe me, I will be there bright and early.
Perfect. Yeah,
awesome.
Perfect.
Before you go, tell people if they want to learn a little bit more about BHPP and the work they carried out in Linda Vista. Is there a website, Facebook groups where people can check it out?
there's the website is under construction right now, but we have a Facebook page, the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project.
Mm-hmm.
Go onto Facebook, like the page. We also have the official Linda Vista Hospital research group page, and it's a closed group. But send a request. I'll approve it. You can get on the page. You can see some of the inside news of what's going on there at the hospital still. It's a great place, a lot of history, and good times.
Last question, Rich. Do you think that the spooky Linda Vista Hospital that we know and love, do you think we'll ever get a chance to experience that again? Maybe for the generation that didn't get a chance to go in there.
I have hope that we will. I believe that it will happen. Keep our fingers crossed. And, with closing, I just want to say that, our goal from the beginning was to get into the hospital and try to, document and create a bridge, so to say, between the paranormal and the general community.
Yeah.
Growing up on the east side, there's a lot of, urban legend. We wanted to, build that bridge and invite people in and have them experience this magical place, on their own. And I'm glad that you were there. I'm glad that you were able to experience it as many times as you have. And, it's and I know you feel this somewhere deep in your heart that there's a piece of you there at that hospital still. There's a piece of that hospital that lives in you still. So, it's a magical place.
It really is. And I think you verbalized my feeling in a great way, because it's true. To this day,
he still talks about it.
Yeah, I still talk about it. It's true.
Genevieve, by the way.
No, but it's definitely something that I carry, and it's almost, I'll be honest with you, and I have you to thank for that. And like I said earlier, I owe you big time for that. It's almost like a little badge that I carry with me, of honor, to say that, that's where I experienced the paranormal for the first time, and I got to be there. Yeah.
You jumped into the paranormal field and jumped right into it big time. Yeah, you did. You were able to go into one of the hottest spots there is.
Absolutely. Rich, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate it. You've been more than generous with your time. And, definitely let me know. I'll be happy to go grab that lunch with you and talk some more, and, let's relive some of those memories.
It was great to meet you for the first time, even though digitally, but great to speak to you.
Hopefully in person soon.
Same here. We'll all meet each other in the next couple of weeks. We'll get over to the hospital and have some lunch.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rich, and enjoy the rest of your night.
Okay, man.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Goodbye.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, because I don't know about you folks, but I mean, that was fun. yet heavy at the same time. That was a lot of stuff. I think I need to grab a sip of water here and turn the lights back on. So enjoy these jams. We're going to come back and wrap this whole thing up.
And I'm pretty sure we'll be listening to some crazy EVPs next if we can find them. So hang on tight because we've got some really interesting audio footage for you to listen to.
That's right. Enjoy the jams. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
West of the Rockies with Frank.
Open your mind.
And we're back to wrap up this edition of West of the Rockies. As always, I'm Engineer Frank on Twitter, West of the Rockies on Facebook, Genevieve Uway on Twitter, who's joining me once again.
Hello, everyone.
And don't forget to check out the website at WOTRradio.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at WOTR Radio. We're going to sort through some of this stuff here. Rich was kind enough to send us the EVP that he mentioned earlier. And I'm really excited to play it for you guys. I'm just going to, honestly, just shut up and play this. So here we go. That's something.
I'd like to say amazing, but anything I say seems to downplay it and make it seem trivial.
It's true.
When
that was
real,
something. Yeah.
When it's real, it's not like in the movies.
I've heard this one before, believe it or not, but it always gets me. It always gets me. Like I said, I had my own little growl type experience EVP, and I'm going to play it here in just a minute, but I didn't hear that one in real time. I went home, played, started going through the
I'd like to
files.
think it would have been worse in real time, because if you had been there, would you have been your pants?
Well, let me, I think I was close at the end of the night when all that other stuff happened.
But do you feel like it's not as bad if you can hear it later on?
The thing is that, okay, number one, I was with 5 other people. So I think that made me feel safe in some...
5 other pretty girls who are way younger than you.
I don't know if Jimmy wants to be qualified as a pretty girl, but...
Well, it made it sound like you were just like the only guy there who was like, oh my God, I'm so scared.
It was embarrassing, folks. That's all I got to say. And I apologize that your humble host here fell miserably at its first day. But ever since then, I've become a lot braver.
Yeah?
I don't sleep with my nightlight on anymore.
Honestly, I do see you venture pretty bravely into some of the investigations we go into, because I'm still scared. I mean, I want to be scared. I feel like I'll lose something if I'm not scared anymore. But like, I see you guys and you're like, yep, okay, so-and-so just said my name, whatever. I'm like, what? No, this is not whatever. They just said your name.
It's funny because I was trying to remember. I know I was scared, but it's a strange type of fear.
Like you want it to happen, but you don't.
Yeah, it's a weird, it's a complex emotion, to say the least. So and I guess because so many things happen there, everything after that hasn't seemed that bad, and maybe that's why I don't know if I'm any braver. I just think that if something is going to happen, it needs to top that for me to react, perhaps in that more frightened state. But that said, let me play the EVP. And I know a lot of the folks that tune into this show probably have heard it in the past. Bear with me. Enjoy it one more time with the people that haven't heard it before. So let's play this one and see what you guys think.
So what is it you have on your phone? That was an audio list? Yeah, somebody's got that. I heard it. Somebody's got it.
So that was mine. That was my EVP right there.
Was that you coughing?
Yeah.
You were just like...
Yeah, it was, I had a little something stuck in my throat. No, but I mean, honestly, we didn't hear that while we were there. I went back home and started going through these files, and boom, there it was. And I can guarantee you, if I would have heard that in real time, I probably would not have stuck around and experienced everything else that happened that night.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
whatever it was, probably had a little bit of mercy on me and my level of bravery or
we
lack
want to
thereof.
keep him here and freak him out.
Oh yeah. No, but believe me, that whole night there were paranormal groups all over the hospital, and I remember we would just kind of like attach ourselves to a group here and a group there, and just kind of see how they did things because I had no experience, and it was the equivalent of being thrown into a pool and having to figure out how to swim for me when it came to investigating the paranormal. But honestly, there were hard lessons learned that night that I treasure to this day. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can really imagine.
Yeah. So, I mean, what can I say? Linda Vista Hospital, is still a pretty active place. Yeah, a pretty active place. Absolutely. Once again, I want to thank my good friend Richard Berni for being with us tonight. It was a blast to talk to him and honestly get a little update on Linda Vista. I think we all kind of left off with the remodeling, and it was cool to catch up and relive some of these memories. So definitely, check out the Facebook page and drop him a line. Tell Rich, what's up on my behalf, and see if you can join that group and check out some of the evidence that they got in that Facebook group for the Boyle Heights Paranormal Project. It's some interesting stuff. I'll say that much. That being said, take care, be safe, God bless. Don't do anything too crazy. We want to see you back next week. Genevieve, thank you for being here.
Frank, thank you for being here.
Yeah, that's right. As always, I'm Engineer Frank. I'm always here. I always have to be here. Darn it.
Just saying.
Not complaining, though. I love this. As always, I'm Engineer Frank on Twitter, West of the Rockies on Facebook, Genevieve Uwe on Twitter. Don't forget to check out the website, WOTRradio.com. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and do that. You can also sign up for our iTunes podcast and Stitcher and all that cool stuff.
And we have a great new review of Contact in the Desert.
Indeed.
It was from a couple of months ago. So,
head over to the YouTube channel or the website and you will catch a cool little review video of that and some other cool stuff that you will find there. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next week.
West of the Rockies with Frank the Engineer on the Independent FM, Los Angeles.